Good evening, everyone. Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted this evening. It is now the 7th of December 2024. It is 10:17 a.m. I'm starting 2 minutes later than I had scheduled this for. I'd scheduled it to start at 10:15. Sorry for being late. Not too bad, though. For a miserable, pathetic little YouTube channel such as mine, it's not bad. Of late, I've been pretty either right on time or very, very close. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, then you may be wondering who's jumping all over me. Yes, like I said, miserable, unscripted little YouTube channel, just a lone voice in the wilderness, a snowy wilderness tonight. Talking about the news events of the day, offering up my perspective. A 58-year-old Canadian, male, white, Christian, straight, all the ticks in the boxes in today's cancel culture world, where a narrative is fed, practically force fed to us. I like to throw my voice out there. And Candy, at the start of all my videos, if you're new, gets a treat. And I put it in my pocket. I got gloves. Where's her treat? Or did she already get her mouth into my pocket and steal it? Nope. There it is. I see I do have people watching. I've already gotten a couple thumbs up. Thank you for smashing the like button. And if you do want to subscribe to the channel, I'll get on. I have a bad habit. I do a lot of preamble. Before I get to the topic at hand, I'm going to be talking about an amazing piece of writing. And I mean that genuinely. This is literary art. The gentleman who wrote the article I'm going to be sharing is a fantastic writer. And so let me deal with Candy, because as you can see, I don't get any rest until she gets this. That's the only thing that matters in her world. Shake, lay down. Oh, she spoke. There we go. Even before I could ask her to. She knows the routine. And so do I. We've trained each other. I have Danny here. He says, good evening. You caught me off guard. Yeah, I didn't do a live last night. I do lives, I would say most nights, 4 or 5 nights a week. Sometimes I'll go 6, 7, 8 days in a row. But it depends, on yesterday I worked until 9 p.m. And then this morning, Saturday morning, I was scheduled to work at 6 a.m. So with very little turnaround time between when I finished work and start work the following morning, I was a little tired. And I worked 9-hour shifts on my feet. And I'm 58. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So Danny says, I caught him off guard. He's getting his ticket ready. He's getting his coffee ready and grabbing his Bible. Because, as I mentioned, 58-year-old Christian, straight, white, male, Canadian, the poster man for cancel culture. And here I am injecting my voice into the public discourse, expressing opinions that I don't think get a lot of traction in today's world, simply because in our DEI world, I'm told to shut up and sit down and be quiet. And I was thinking about, how the war in Israel, what's going on between Israel and Iran, between Israel and Iran's proxy groups. If you read the description of this video, I mean, it's falling out of the public consciousness. We have collectively as a society in Canada and the US, Western world, and monarchy showed up. Collectively, we have a very short attention span. I remember when the war broke out in Israel, when October 7th occurred, 2023. At that time, prior to that event, the major news event in the world had been Zelensky and Ukraine and the situation with Russia, and there were a number of meme type posts going around social media circles, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, with Zelensky, don't forget about me. Hey, I'm down to my last $1 billion US. I need help too. And because the war in Ukraine has been dragging on and on and on, and it gets pushed down the news cycle. And if you're passionately involved emotionally involved in a news event, then that's unsettling. You want everyone worried, thinking about what you're worried and thinking about. And so this is when it comes to wartime propaganda. Anyone who, again, is new to the station, I like to just mention that I do have an ex-military background. I left the Canadian Armed Forces in 2021, June of 2021. June 1st, 2021 was my last day in uniform. And, talking about being the poster child for, or poster man for cancel culture. One of the reasons, I've had a lot of videos taken down, and I've had my YouTube channel censored and given 1-2 week jail terms, is because back in June of 2021, I left the military, and the reason I was leaving, the reason I requested a voluntary release was because in December of 2020, the Canadian government, Health Canada, had given an interim authorization to the COVID so-called vaccines. And I knew at that point that the vaccine would be mandated. I knew that it was going to be required. You don't have to be Nostradamus to figure these things out. I don't claim to be all that in a bag of chips. I'm not the smartest, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm not the sharpest pencil in the pencil case, but it's not hard to figure out. Propaganda can be easy to spot if you know what to look for. And this article, published by Aljazeera, no less, is spectacular. I'm going to read it to you. I'm not going to try and attempt to share my screen so that you can view it and read it along with me, because the last few times I've tried to share news articles, my screen just goes black. Nothing is on the screen. And I think that's because of Justin Trudeau's government and what they've done in terms of this bill. I forget the name, Bill C-13, Bill C-16. There are all these numbered bills out there. But the Canadian government has made it impossible for Canadians to share news articles, or they made it very difficult to share news articles via social media platforms. If I go to share a news article on my Facebook feed, it says, due to Canadian legislation, you are unable to share the following article. It's annoying, but I can still read the article and talk about it. Let me read what's being written before I get going. So Anna Monarchy's wishing greetings. Anna Monarchy is asking everyone to hit the like button. There are a number of people watching here. Hey, if you want to be discerning and say, hey, I don't like it yet, I'm not going to just give one out indiscriminately. I want to see, entertain me. Well, fair enough. But it helps to promote the channel. If you hit the like button, it helps to defeat the algorithm, so to speak, because a voice like mine is, I would argue, I'm not given, I'm not going to be promoted. And that's neither here, that may be because I'm the poster child for poster man for cancel culture. And it may also be because I'm a miserable, pathetic little station, and you may decide that for yourself. It's all, I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. And Monarchy said that he was listening to rap right before this. Listen to rap music. Not my favorite, although sometimes. So there are certain songs that do resonate that I do like. And Marky's writing, what about the peasants' ration finances? So much happening in the world. I want to speak to that because this is the thing with the war going on, Israel and Iran, Israel against Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis. That's got a lot of coverage over the last year, but it's being pushed down the news cycle. Look at all the things that are happening in the world. We have France, their parliament, whatever it's called, Parlement. I don't know if there's a different name for it. The prime minister's, the government of France has collapsed because of a vote of no confidence. And so Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, has to try and appoint a new prime minister and try to cobble together a new governing coalition. Otherwise, there's talk that the economy in France, that the government won't be able to fund programs, et cetera, et cetera. So it has severe implications potentially in the coming days, weeks, months for France. And apparently that same situation exists in Germany, this tenuous, hold on governance within these democratic European countries. And the lack of stability in government is being blamed by the media on the extreme right. The alt-right type individuals are destabilizing our and my argument would be, no, it is not the alt-right that is destabilizing. It is the efforts of woke left, quasi-Marxist fascist, which is a strange combination, but in my mind, that's what it is. They're taking elements of both Marxism and fascism in an attempt basically to subvert democracy and impose their will. And when I say their will, what I'm talking about is organizations like the World Economic Forum, who are trying to determine the direction for the world. And even if it's in opposition to what the majority of people in democratic countries want, they engage in all manner of bullying tactics, propaganda, certainly, there's that word again, to try and push things along. I've got 10 people watching now, and the news, the live chat feed is filling up, which I love because it animates me so much. So there's, the political situation in France, in Germany, in South Korea. There's talk that the leader of that country may try to reimpose martial law. They're saying that the leader of South Korea, that the situation is now back under control. There are calls on the leader of Korea to resign his position. I think he's the prime minister. I think it's a parliamentary system. He's being called, or perhaps it's more Republican style. I don't know Korea's political framework. There are too many countries in the world to know them all. So, you have the situation there. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, what used to be known as Zaire, Central Africa, there has been an outbreak of some disease. Maybe we should call it disease X, who knows? And it's killed they are saying that it's possibly killed as many as 120, 30, 40, 50 people, that it's an unknown illness and that they're investigating. And in the days, week ahead, they may be able to put a name to it. We'll find out. Some form of respiratory disease. So, and then we can just look at my own native country of Canada and everything that's going on. The Trudeau Liberals have just banned what they're terming as assault rifles or assault weaponry. And I think it's adding about hundreds, literally hundreds, 100 plus anyway. I think it's 300 plus firearms that are now being deemed as assault rifles and are going to be banned in Canada. And then once they're collected, is the idea, how lucky are they, or how able are they to enforce this legislation? How much pushback will they get from people who heretofore have been legally owning these firearms? And the intention is to seize them and send them to Ukraine. Alberta, we've got more news out of Alberta, probably, Canada's version of Texas, Florida. And they've introduced legislation that would protect children and protect parental rights. They're not going to allow schools to engage in things like name or pronoun changing without parental advisement. The parents have to be notified, and also banning treatments like hormonal treatments and puberty blockers to anyone under the age of 16. Anyone still a child, I guess it would probably be 16 and under. In Canada, legally, an individual is not an adult until they reach the age of 18. At the age of 17, legally, an individual is still, under the eyes of the law, a child. Anyway, so that's going on. You've got Trump, who's a news cycle unto himself. There could be the Trump News Network that would report on all things Donald Trump 24/7, and they'd never run out of material. There's always something going on there, with his appointments, with his travels. He's in France right now, apparently. Like he's a news cycle unto himself. And then you have this ongoing, situation in New York City where this CEO for United Healthcare, or whatever it's called, the CEO of this company, who was gunned down outside of his hotel in downtown Manhattan, downtown New York. So many things going on. And, harkens me back to, remember the days when you and I remember these days, you'd come home from work, you'd have dinner, you'd sit down and you'd watch the nightly news, whichever one you wanted. So my parents, when I was growing up, it was NBC Nightly News. Earlier, when I was younger, living in the U.S. itself, it was Walter Cronkite and the CBS Nightly News. Then later, they liked Tom Brokaw, so they switched to the NBC Nightly News. Or it could be CBC, the National, or CTV National News, whatever. And you used to watch, it'd be about half an hour long, 30 minutes, and they would take significant stories in the world, what they determined was newsworthy. They would decide, the news networks would look at all the news in the world, all the news in the country, and they would decide what you needed to be thinking about. And I frame it this way, and I've done it many times, is they program us, they tell us what to think, what to believe, and even how to feel about things. And so, and it drives me crazy. Because what they think I should worry about is not always necessarily the things that I do worry about. I'm not worried about disease X, whatever this disease X in Congo is. I don't care, but they tell me, oh, you have to care. You have to care. This is important. Man, I'm doing a lot of preamble, and let's see. I've got to catch up, though. There has been so much written. Danny's writing 2 years to slow the curve. Hank Holiday is down in Texas, and he just got back from our Christmas parade and says, howdy. I like having differing perspective. I like having people. I've got, people from all over Canada watch the stream. Danny's in Montreal. Whale Oil Beef, we'll see if he shows up. He's out in BC. I've got people in Ontario, where I live. Hank, again, down in the US. I've had another gentleman whose name escapes me coming in from Wyoming. Sojourner Didymus, aka Thomas, who comes in from the Netherlands. And I love the varying perspective. I'd love to get some Aussies and Kiwis on board, But anyway, let's read on. And Monarchy. I'm just I got Rayum 486, a name I don't think I've seen before. Hello to you as well. I'm going to assume male. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just reading. And Anna Monarchy puts up saying malaria, Bill Gates' mosquito should stop it. I've read a little bit about that, not a great deal. Danny is suggesting that everyone watch Jordan Peterson's latest interview with his daughter. He talks about Bill C-63, calling it a Trojan horse. Past first house reading, we must look up, read, and share Bill C-63. Canadians are constantly being faced with these dystopian little, we're overwhelmed. Gun restriction legislation, free speech restriction legislation. There's just so much legislation winding its way through the House of Commons and it's impactful. It impacts Canadians. I used to share news articles regularly on my social media feed saying, look at this garbage that they're reporting. Look at this what they call journalism in this country. There's a case where CBC News in Edmonton, showed a picture of a mannequin on their news coverage. They had a backdrop picture of a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator. Oh, I'm so scared. And this is the kind of garbage stuff. You used to be able to share that and show it to people. Now, Canadians were not allowed. When Western Standard broke the news that the Alberta Health Services had lied, Dina Hinshaw had misrepresented the death of a 14-year-old Alberta individual to COVID, it was the Western Standard that broke the news story that the child had not died of COVID, as Alberta Health Services claimed, but rather that the child had terminal stage 4 inoperable brain cancer and was in palliative care. Which is where you go when you're dying, and that they'd force the kid to take a PCR test just days before his fully expected death, and then they tried to blame it on COVID. They later apologized and said that it was a mistake and an error in judgment and all this stuff, which is horse hockey. It was not a mistake. They did it, in my opinion, that was no mistake. They did it on purpose. That was October of 2021. They were just getting ready to authorize the use of the COVID jabs to kids, and they needed to sell them. Get these kids to roll up their sleeves. A kid just died of COVID. No, he had stage 4 inoperable brain cancer and was receiving end-of-life care when you forced a PCR test on him. And goodness knows the amplification cycle on the PCR test was probably 40, I would guess. I don't know that, though. Anyway, Anarchy says, sorry about the terrible taste accent joke. Okay, I'm going to leave that one alone. Anyone wanting to read it, go ahead. Rayum 486 says, yes, male, I guessed right. With a name like Ray, but you never know in today's world. Wasn't that the name of one of the characters, the new Jedi character in the Star Wars franchise? Whatever. And it looks like I'm pretty much caught up. So the live chat is there. Stuff it full. Love it. I won't read everything, as Monarchy says. You can read that. And let's talk about what's happening in Israel and this is a brilliant propaganda piece. One of the best I've ever read, to be honest. It's like a Hallmark card in terms of, hitting you in the heart. And it's very well done. Propaganda works. That is why it is used. Before I read the article, I'm just going to remind you of the situation when Saddam Hussein invaded the nation of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. The Iraqi forces invaded the nation state of Kuwait. And the reason that was the justification for invading Kuwait was that the Kuwaitis were accused of slant drilling sideways or diagonally at an angle into Iraqi oil fields, stealing their natural resources, basically. And there were diplomatic tensions between the two countries, and apparently it's reported that the emir, the king of Kuwait, insulted Saddam Hussein with a very Middle Eastern insult in saying Saddam Hussein threatened to take action, and Kuwait, the emir of Kuwait, said, yeah, go ahead, and you want to take us on, I'll take your wives into my harem, or something to that effect. Which then Iraq invaded, very quickly overwhelmed Kuwait's limited military forces. And the U.S. then came in and wanted to liberate Kuwait. And they came out with a number of justifications for going to war to get Americans and international support. They said, we're fighting for democracy. And then intelligent people looked at that and said, wait a minute, Kuwait isn't a democracy. It's a kingdom. It's an emirate. It's not a democratic country. Then they said, well, Okay, yeah, but Saddam Hussein represents a major threat to world peace and security. We have to take him out. Otherwise, the entire, Middle Eastern region and then eventually globally could be threatened by this, by Saddam Hussein. And again, those people with a few brain cells to rub together looked and said, well, wait a minute, this is the same Iraq that was in an 7, 8 long year war with their neighbor Iran. And it was basically a stalemate. They couldn't even defeat Iran. And this is the major threat to world peace and security. And then what they did is the George H.W. Bush administration hired a PR agency and they engaged in a propaganda campaign. And they had a Kuwaiti princess, a member of the royal family. So a young girl, I think she was 12 or 13. She addressed a joint session of Congress and told the world, because it was televised, she told sitting members of the House and Senate, as well as everyone in the, anyone watching the news coverage, that Kuwait hospitals were being infiltrated by Iraqi soldiers who were taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the ground. And that, boom, did it. Then the world went all in. Oh my gosh, it's a humanitarian crisis. These horrible Iraqi soldiers are throwing babies out of incubators. And you can look into that. Amnesty International and numerous other organizations then went in and tried to validate the claim, and they found out it was a propaganda tool. And it's called atrocity propaganda. It's what you always do in war. You try and make yourself to be the white knight riding on a white horse, and the enemy is the devil incarnate. Always been that way. And for what it's worth, Israel engages in that as well. All nations do. Canada has done it. The United States has done it. The Nazis did it. The Western powers in every war. We've done it. Everyone does it. Propaganda is de rigueur, to be expected. Let me read, because a few other things have been written. So I'm losing anti-monarchy apparently to battery issues. Danny's writing, propaganda only works if you allow it to. Okay? And according to Danny, the propaganda over a certain disease that 2020 never worked on me because I didn't allow it to. Yeah, it can be anything that will trigger an emotional response. And this is where you have to be guarded, because ultimately, and I think everyone, we have to acknowledge this, we're emotional creatures. And once your emotions get engaged, it's at that point that your brain shuts down. And emotion can be fear, anger, sorrow, whatever. Cryptomeria is writing that still happens. War is won by media, not bullets. You can look at a lot of people make a lot of Americans and others make the comment that the U.S. lost the Vietnam War not because of the failure of the military to achieve victory, but because they lost the war at home. The support for the war in Vietnam just kept going south and south and south. And when you got into the early 70s, it started to become untenable politically. So if you can get the hearts and minds of the Western population on your side, you win the war. And I see that playing out in spades during this ongoing conflict between the Iranian-backed Palestinian forces and the nation state of Israel. And Monarchy is writing that in World War II, the West made the Nazis look like guerrillas with babies on bayonets and painted posters, bad as Goering or whatever Nazi propagandists. Goebbels, I think, Goebbels, however it's spelled, Joseph Goebbels. Well, I think he was their propaganda minister. Hank Holiday is making a great point, because I am anyone watching this who's new, I'm an unapologetic Christian, and I don't have a biblical passage tonight. I mentioned that to Danny in particular. But I always have it here. There you can see it says Bible, the New Oxford Annotated Bible. I have a few. I have 4, 5 Bibles in this house. But if something does come to mind, always want to have it there, because to navigate this incredibly beastly world, we have to, you need a solid place to put your feet. The ground is shifting under our feet constantly. But when you have this to stand on, when you have the Word of God to stand on, you're on solid ground. So let me finish off reading. Hank is reading that Satan, the father of lies, loves war, and he has the leaders in his pockets. Yes, and I think it was Gables, but I could be wrong too. There's only so much I can, although I do not own a smartphone. So I'm going to read this article, and I want to make the point. It is brilliant. This writer is an amazingly good writer. So I'm going to flip off my screen. I'm now looking at the page. It's Aljazeera.com. It's in their opinion section. However, their editors decide what to publish. And this was written on published on December 6th, according to the website, December 6th. We're right now December 7th. So it's, less than 48 hours old. I actually saw this Thursday. As I was going into work, I checked my news feed, and bang, this was the top story, very top story on my news feed. Google, of course, plays the algorithm game, and they know what I'm interested in, and so but I'm also unapologetically pro-Israel, fallen, broken Israel. Let's face it, all humanity, all of us, all nations. We are all fallen, broken, imperfect, but among the fallen, broken, fallen, broken Iran versus fallen, broken Israel, I side with Israel. Anyway, here is what it says. It says, "Are we your perfect victims now?" That is the headline. "Are we your perfect victims now?" And then the subtitle is, "In memory of Mahmoud Al-Madun." I apologize in advance if I don't pronounce things. I do not speak Arabic or any Middle Eastern language. In memory of Mahmoud Al-Madun, the beloved Gaza soup kitchen chef Israel killed in a targeted drone attack on November 30th. This is being written by Nahed Elrayes. And again, I apologize. There's a description of the writer down below. He's a Palestinian writer, composer, and he's a development manager at UNRWA, at the UN Relief Workers Agency. I'll read his full bio before I read the article. It's quite the bio. The guy's got some bona fides behind him. Nahed Elrayes is a Palestinian writer, composer, and development manager at UNRWA USA. He has been recognized in Minjin's Essays That Changed Australia, Arab America's Top 30 Under 30 back in 2023, so he's young. The Guardian 2024 Walkley Awarded Leaving Gaza, SBS, so these are where he's been published, SBS, the LA Times, AP News, Al Jazeera and The Stream, The New Arab, and more. Recently, Nahed broke the story of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra cancellation of pianist Jason Gillum, sparking global controversy. He's an accomplished writer, accomplished journalist, and he's writing an op-ed piece here. And it says, "It feels strange to greet Chef Mahmoud. There is something about mourning a stranger that condemns their real self to obscurity. I hesitate to grieve a brother I never had, a laugh I never heard, secrets I never learned, arguments and breakfasts that we never shared. I hesitate to grieve the handshake I can never give him, for feeding thousands who may not survive in a place I may never see again. Emotional. Reading on. I hesitate, even as the deceased faced a cruel death, a death only following he honored my family by name, even as I remember the times his brother's eyes glimmered when he spoke of their work in Gaza North. But when all is said and done, we know how this ends. He dies unjustly, and like a genetic imprint, we feel some burn of an old scalpel in our chest, the burn of a question, the Palestinian question. How can I make this victim a hero? No. How can I make this hero a victim? Can we do both? As if it's the English language that decides. To a child, a hero wears a mask, but Chef Mahmoud had no mask. His face was shown from the start. His family was exposed from the start. They still are. To an adult, a hero wears an army uniform and takes lives. Chef Mahmoud did nothing but save lives. He had no defensive camouflage, not even a rifle. His only weapon was the ladle in his hand, and that weapon saved thousands. How can anyone but a hero outdo the courage of all these characters, fictional or not, better able to defend themselves? Will the world ever understand the sheer humanity of such a person? Is it lost in translation? Need to lubricate. Reading on. It feels like the world has lost fluency in the language that Palestine is most fluent in, the language of deeds. That language which Mahmoud al-Madoum left his mark with the richest poetry. There is the burn again. I feel the weight of my youth wasted outside Palestine, away from men no nation but Palestine could produce, away from families who, under the crushing weight of an inevitable famine, say, no thank you, we are too creative to starve, too upright to uproot. Or, you can hold a rifle to my head and strip me to my underwear, but I promise you, you will never find what you are looking for. You will never incapacitate the heart that beats for Gaza. You cannot kidnap it into cowardice, impoverish it into dependency, or parch it into silence. I will stay here forever. And there he stayed forever. It feels strange to grieve Chef Mahmoud. At first, I wanted these words to exalt him. I thought that was why my chest burned. But it still burns, and now I realize none of this exaltation is for me, for the al-Madoum family, or even for us Palestinians. No, I am actually assembling these English words to appeal to the humanity of our colonizers by proxy, like a space capsule sent out in the hopes of finding extraterrestrial life. I suddenly realized the importance of refining my tone and keeping any emotional asides within neat parentheses, 10 words or less. I hate the fact that we have to die. I hate the fact that we know exactly who will die and how. My screen just jumped around. I hate the fact that we know exactly who will die and how, that we predict this based on the boundless moral depravity of a genocidal colonizing force that kills food workers, that slaughters our families one by one like it is nothing. I hate that I have to be articulate and proofread this in case some inconsistency in my writing in case some inconsistency in my writing flow fails to convince the reader that genocide is worth stopping. I look at the time. It's 3 a.m. After 4 hours pretending this kind man's death is not devastating me, pretending through words, I finally understand what the burn is. We Palestinians know who we are. We know what Israel is, but what remains is for the world to see it. As a world, you told us to endure the worst terrors and humiliations of the occupation without turning to violence. You told us to teach our children love and science, even if Israel has bombed every school. You told us to sing and smile and cook through our suffering. You told us not to be beggars, nor to starve in silence. You told us to resist, but without any weapons, to count on your eyes to defend us. Chef Mahmoud did all those things and was assassinated by drone strike. Are we your perfect victims now? And it says the views expressed in this article are the author's own and do not necessarily reflect Al Jazeera's editorial stance, although they chose to publish it. They wanted to get that. That is an excellent piece of propaganda. It hits all the buttons. I don't think you can do much better. And what it's centering on is this individual is claiming, and he's all over, he's on ABC, he's been on PBS giving interviews, saying he has eyewitness accounts that this is what happened. And that this soup kitchen worker, aid worker, humanitarian, was targeted by a drone. That's what he says. That's what he says the eyewitness accounts say. Do I believe that? I don't discount the possibility, but at the same time, I'm also aware that the first casualty of war is truth. As I mentioned with the George H.W. Bush administration telling the world that Iraqi soldiers were throwing babies out of incubators. Oh, they're monsters. And everyone went to war. Thousands of people, tens of thousands of people probably died. U.S. servicemen died. Other countries' nation soldiers died because of, the horrible Iraqi soldiers who had thrown babies from incubators. Is an old bromide. The first casualty of war is truth. You don't know what to believe. Believe nothing that you hear and only half of what you read, and be equally circumspect with anything you even see, because now with CGI and with artificial intelligence and with all these tools, propagandists can create videos to push a narrative. And that article, man, oh man, you talk about referring to Israel as a colonizer, as if there's another Israel somewhere else and that this is their colony, right? This is the way colonization works. Britain colonized the New World. The Americas, Canada was a colony of Great Britain. The United States was a colony of Great Britain. India was a colony. You have a centrally located power, and then they extend their empire. They open colonies. Well, where's head office for the Israel, the Jewish Israelis? What they're colonizing from where? They live in the land. Jewish presence in Israel has never been erased. Going back to Roman times, while the Romans tried to wiped the name of Israel off the map. They renamed their former province of Judea. They renamed it Palestine. In Latin, it was rendered as Philistia, which in English became Palestine. That's a Roman name that was given in 135 AD. But he writes that down as fact. He doesn't offer the opposing point of view, and in an opinion piece, that's fair. That's fair. When you want to propagandize, facts are not important. So this idea that Jewish Israelis, formerly Jewish Palestinians, that they are colonizers. No, in most cases, the Jewish were legal immigrants to the land when it was being ruled by the Ottomans. They were immigrants to the land when it was ruled by the British. And then they became refugees seeking refuge after World War II, when the hostilities of World War II and the concentration camps were liberated. A lot of Jews, European Jews, had no place to go. They had no property. All their assets had been seized by the Nazis, and the World Jewish Congress basically implored them, come to the Holy Land, come to the British Mandate for Palestine. The British have stated openly that they will look favorably upon creating a Jewish nation state here. Come. And Jews emigrated into the land as refugees, not as colonizers, but it's a nice pejorative term. It makes you seem, in this Marxist ideology where everyone gets divided into one of two camps, you're either the oppressed or the oppressor. You're either the victim or the victimizer. And in this world, in this Marxist ideology, you always want to identify with the victims, with the oppressed, never with the oppressor, never with the victimizer. Let me read what's being written. I've got a number of things being written, and some of them, all right. Anne Monarchy has been filling it up and is saying that one of my great-grandfathers was mustard gas by his own side. Collateral damage when he was out scouting or hunting Nazis with his squad, and after decades of being denied veteran disability. We do a horrible job of looking after our veterans in this country. But U.S., same issue. When gas is used in warfare, especially in World War I, World War II, all that has to happen is for the wind to change. You can't predict the weather. Climate change types should remember that. Can't predict the weather, can't predict the climate. Every weather prediction, good luck. And the same people trying to tell us that the planet, that the weather patterns and the climate is going to be horrible in 10 years. These are the same individuals who can't tell you whether it's going to rain tomorrow or not. Reading on. Danny is writing that both sides of World War I and World War II were funded by the Rockefellers. By the Rockefeller, you know what? Finance doesn't care. By the Rockefellers, by the Rothschild family. In my own little town here, Brighton, Ontario, there's a conservation area called Proctor Park. There was a prominent citizen back in the 1860s by the name of Proctor. And there's a house on the conservation area called Proctor House. And that house was built by this Proctor family. And what he did is he supplied both sides during the American Civil War. And the house has one of those widow's pulpit. It's on a high piece of ground overlooking Brighton Bay. And he could look down and see his ships going down to the south, going down to the United States. And again, supplying both sides of the Civil War. War is big business. Anne Monarchy writes that he was reading the typewriter letters a bit over 20 years ago my granddad saved after my granddad passed and the family was going through his stuff. It's amazing what happens when someone passes away and the stuff you read. And you get these word of mouth accounts. And can you rely on them? Actually, I should share this at some point. I was cited for bravery when I was 18 for pulling the kid out of Lake Ontario who had fallen into the lake. And basically, here's what happened. Myself, two family members, well, there were four of us all together, four family members. We were down at Lake Ontario, Petticoat Creek Conservation Area in Pickering. We were tobogganing, and the three guys, we went down the hill on the toboggan all together. And as we did, we spilled. We hit a little jump that we'd set up, or someone had set up, and we spilled over, and we were laughing. And as you do after something like that, we thought it was a spectacular wipeout. And we looked, the hill was crowded with lots of kids, probably a dozen or so kids. And so we looked around as if to say, hey, wasn't that amazing? And the hill was deserted. No one was there. And suddenly a young lad, 7, 8, 9 years of age, came running up, and he said, come quick, a kid fell into Lake Ontario, or a kid fell in the lake, or whatever. So we got up and started running toward the lake, and I grabbed the toboggan thinking it could be used as a reach device. And one of the guys turned back to me and said, grab the good. And we got to the lake. And what had happened is the water at the edge, the lake was frozen over probably 10, 15, 20, 30, I don't know how many feet out the lake had frozen over. And then the water would come lapping up on the edge of the ice. And as it lapped up, it built kind of a little shelf, an ice shelf, what I'll call a little ice wall. And this kid, this little ice wall, ice shelf, there were ice chips up there. And the kid apparently had climbed up on it and was kicking the ice into Lake Ontario. He slipped and he fell in the wrong direction, and he fell into the lake. And he yelled, help, help. And the woman with us, she went and tried to pull the kid out. The shelf, the ice shelf, was probably about waist high, a little less. But because of his heavy, he was wearing snowsuit, winter coat, it was soaked. She wasn't able to lift him out. So me and the other guy, there were four of us all together, myself, another adult male, and then a younger kid, about 11 or 12. We were able to pull him out. And then once we got him out of the water, the question is, what do we do with him? We're in a conservation area, but I knew the geography of the area, and I knew there was a hill. You just go up that hill and there's a street. It's going to take us less than 5 minutes to run up the hill and find a house. So one of us put him on put the kid on our backs, piggyback style. I think it was the other guy. We ran up the hill and went to just the first house that was there. And it was a retired firefighter. He invited us in. We got the kid in a blanket and towels and dried him off as best we could, called his mother. His mother came and picked him up, and Bob's your uncle, everything's fine. That was what actually happened. Now, when I got home, I was 18 at the time. I was still in high school. Actually, yeah, I would have been 18. I was in my last year of high school. It was January of 1985. Yeah, so I would have been 19 years of age. And so what happened is I told my parents. And then my parents told a family friend who was a Metro Toronto police officer. And then that Metro Toronto police officer wrote or told a member of the Durham Regional Police. And then the member of the Durham Regional Police wrote a report recommending that myself and the other two individuals who pulled this kid out, that we should be cited for bravery. And there was really nothing brave that we had done. But it went from me telling my parents hearing the story secondhand, then they told Metro Toronto police officer, then the Metro Toronto police officer told a Durham Regional Police officer. And when he wrote his report, which my youngest found it, and I had it in an album somewhere, the report that this Durham Region police officer found out had written, and that it was written as if we crawled out onto fragile ice that wouldn't support the weight of a 6-year-old, and that we risked life and limb to rescue this kid. And it wasn't like that. Actually, the kid, had we not been there, the kid would have probably died because the water freezing. But he could actually stand up. That's how close it was. He could actually stand. He just couldn't get over that ice shelf. He just needed a couple strong hands to pull him out. That was it. That anyone would. So, but I point that out just to show how this game of telephone, what actually happened, going to my parents, from me to my parents to a Metro cop to the Durham police. So 3 steps later, it turns into this harrowing tale. And we did get cited for bravery, but I never went to get the citation because it was like, we didn't do anything. Genuinely, we did what any person would have done. Didn't risk anything. Anyway, just reading what's being written. Amonarchy writes, I was reading okay, I read that. Cryptomeria is writing, I just keep thinking what my grandpa would be proud of and going through the trenches, And Anamarchy's got a backup phone now with a 70% battery. Fast forward a bit and see what's being written. Don't worry about the thumbs up. I appreciate them, but I don't like to make too big a deal. I sound like sound desperate. Give me some likes. If I get them, I get them. If I don't, I don't. I enjoy this conversation. I enjoy what we're talking about. I enjoy the interaction so much. Now, Amonarchy's writing that his dad took a hockey stick in each hand and went Terminator on our pond's winter ice up to his chest to save a neighbor's dog that fell through when I was too young to help. That, you see, that, risking like I just point that out to I ended up getting my picture taken with the Toronto Star got wind of the story, and so I went over to that kid's house, and they took a picture of us together, and we got our picture in the paper, and made me a celebrity at school for a few days. But anyway, just insane. But I want to get back to this. I mean, this article, he has it from an eyewitness that, the drone targeted this guy, this Al-Madoum. And the writing is just so spectacular, but there is so, it takes such a shortcut through the facts, and he really hammers it home. As a world, you told us to endure the worst terrors and humiliations of the occupation without turning to violence. I mean, this is what the world is waking up to now, is that they're starting to realize that Israel, the situation in Gaza, well, what about Yemen? In Gaza, they're saying that 40-ish thousand people have been killed, but they don't distinguish between Hamas fighters and civilians, and they don't even have documentation on tons of the people killed. You just were supposed to take them at their word. Meanwhile, in neighboring Sudan, just across the Red Sea from Saudi Arabia and Sudan, in roughly the same time period, 60,000 people are reckoned to be killed. And I'm sure there's an amazing humanitarian or 2 or 3 or a dozen who've been killed in the Sudan. And then we look at the situation in Yemen, where over the past 10 or so years, in their ongoing civil war that's kind of simmered down of late between the Houthis and the Saudi-backed Yemeni government, 400,000 people have been killed. And again, I'm sure in that country, war is brutal. Good people die in war. And now we have the situation in Syria where their civil war is blowing up again. And in that country, over the last 10 years, 500,000 have been killed. Like over 1 million people between Sudan, Yemen, and Syria have been killed over the last 10 years. 1 million, hundreds of thousands of children, little kids. And you're not going to see this guy writing an article about an amazing humanitarian in Yemen or someone in Syria or someone in the Sudan, because that's he's a Palestinian and a UN aid worker or UN relief worker, which there are all kinds of interesting allegations out there regarding the UN and how they regard the aggression from Gaza against the nation state of Israel, from wipe it off the map from the river to the sea. We're taking it all back. It's ours. It's not yours. Forgetting the history of how Israel came to exist. It's a nation of it was founded by roughly 800,000 Palestinian Jews. Founded that nation, and they fought off the colonizers. They fought off 5 colonizing armies from Egypt, from Saudi, from Jordan, from Syria, from Lebanon. 5 invading nations who wanted to colonize the former British Mandate for Palestine. The Jewish Palestinians living in the land are not colonizers. They don't have a home country somewhere else. They are Jewish Palestinians, and they founded a nation. When Egypt captured the Gaza Strip, it became Egyptian. They were the colonial occupying power. When the Jordanians captured Judea, Samaria, the western bank of the Jordan River, they did not create and give self-rule to these people living there. No, they kicked all the Jewish Palestinians, the formerly Jewish Palestinians, out. They ethnically cleansed their new territory and they colonized it. They were the colonial power. Israel is not a colonizer. That is a gross misrepresentation of the facts. It's taking extreme liberty with the English language to call them colonizers. Colonizers, no. Refugees, immigrants, yes. They did many Jews are either have emigrated legally into the country, or they are the descendants of those who have been emigrating in there for the last 100+ years. And then there are some who are the ancestors of individuals who have been living in the Holy Land, going back centuries, going back millennia. It's complicated. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Just see what's being written. Cryptomeria is using a lot of emoji type pictures. Christmas tree from the midnight sun where the hot springs flow. How soft your fields so green can whisper tales of gore, of how we claimed the tides of war. We are your overlords. Seems like a bit of poetry. Looks like we have some poetry exchanges going on, talking about Led Zeppelin and more. And all right. And Cryptomeria seems to be wanting for a white Christmas. Well, I don't know if we're going to get it next week in my area, Northumberland County, an hour outside of the GTA. They're saying that the temperature is going to go 5-6 degrees. We'll see if that happens. They can't predict the weather. They can't predict climate. They keep trying and keep failing. But we'll see what happens. The world is devolving. I haven't been able to draw in scripture to this, Danny. I'm sorry. It's except to say what I said at the beginning, that in this world gone crazy, broken, fallen, and where we're being given over to every depravity, every immoral device, where we're just being given up. Get into relationship with Jesus Christ, and you will not be given up. You will have a place in the ark that'll save you from the storm that's coming. Forget this winter storm. There's a worse storm coming, and that's fine. Bring it. That's my attitude. I'm honestly at the point where I say, bring it on. Bring it on. And stop shadowboxing. Come out in the open. Forget the propaganda. Come out and say it plainly. Let's just go, because ultimately, this is not home. So I'll leave you there. I almost feel like I'm interrupting the conversation, though, because you guys are having such amazing conversations. Cryptomeria saying that in 1998, he worked at the Old England Inn in Esquimalt. That's where the Canadian West Coast Naval Base is. I don't know of it. Maybe Cryptomeria does. I never got out to Esquimalt. What's interesting is Danny was sharing something that came out about a Canadian Armed Forces survey that was sent out. And I used to fill these out regularly. You got them in your email, and you'd be told by your sergeant, by the warrant, do that survey. It's got to be done. All right. And, do you agree strongly, strongly agree, somewhat agree, disagree, strongly disagree? You'd have those choices. They'd throw statements at you. And in that survey, as reported by either True North or Rebel News, Danny brought this up to me. Anyone with the members were asked if they had recently purchased any extreme right paraphernalia or clothing or anything like that. And the example they gave is the Canadian version of the MAGA hat, Make Canada Great Again. And they refer to that as extremist. This world, we're going crazy. But when he wrote, he put it in the notes here, and he wrote CAF. And I was like, CAF, is that Canadian Air Force? Because when I started in the Army, it was always the CF, the Canadian Forces. And it was only laterally that we started to refer to the CF as the CAF. So I couldn't believe that when I read that, when I read it from the stream the other night, and you wrote CAF, I went, CAF, is that Canadian Air Force? Then later I'm like, Canadian Armed Forces. When I went in, and for a long time, it was the Canadian Forces, not the CAF. And so I default to CF always. Anyway, Anne Markey writes, well, food, right. All I was listening to Gordon and conversing, multitasking, a bit distracted with what I am doing. Hey, all's good. I mean, I appreciate everyone coming on, watching. I do appreciate, if you want to like it, great. If you don't, it's okay. We'll see what happens. One night, I think what will generally happen is I'll do a video that's pertinent, where I jump on something, and the one I did the other night on the Schofield Bible has been watched 400 or 500 times. Sometimes you hit a topic that just resonates with people, and I usually, when that happens, pick up a few subscribers. It happens, but it is what it is. This channel is what it is. The main purpose behind this is, to be a voice in dark times. These are scary times that we're living in, and there's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and a lot of it comes from the mainstream media, who are supposed to be trusted sources, from our own government officials. We've seen our own health officials engage in misinformation and disinformation. Public health officials have done it. So it's a difficult world to navigate. And as you know, Satan was a liar from the start, and is the father of all lies. And anything that I say, verify it, ruminate over it, research it, pray over it, and let the Holy Spirit convict you. But in order for the Holy Spirit to convict you, you have to have invited Jesus Christ into your heart, so that you can form a relationship. And the way you further that relationship is by getting daily into the Word of God. I'm finishing up 1 Kings now. I read a chapter or two each day at lunch. And probably 7 out of 8 days, I'll be reading a scripture verse. Danny is saying that he's here, and that everyone here, that you're here because you enjoy my content. Yeah. Sometimes I think I need to be more focused, but I enjoy the way it is. So Danny's saying, trust but verify, let God be true and all men liars. Jesus is king. And that's it. And I would caution anyone to be very wary when you come across a religious voice, which I consider myself somewhat in that category. I speak about faith. I speak about God. I speak about Christ. But be very wary of anyone who contends to know the mind of God. And I know that is something I believe you need to be cautious of. It's tempting to engage in that type of rhetoric because it's popular. People gravitate toward it. People gravitate towards strength, conviction, assuredness. They don't want to hear a voice which is wishy-washy and saying the rapture. There are individuals who say, they will tell you exactly what is going to happen as if they've seen it, scripted out, and they're just waiting for it to, follow the script that they believe. Be cautious. We don't know the mind of God. Who has known the mind of God? Who has been God's counselor? Certainly not I. Read the book of Job for the reference. Anna Monarchy writes that the Council of Nicaea and such have altered such. I'm going to have to do a video talking about some of what I believe to be, and I will present what I can in terms of misconceptions that are used to attack the Christian faith. And one of them is that the Bible has been changed. There's a guy, and I don't know his name. I don't follow him, never have. But he's a guy who claims that, the Syrian Bible says that Jesus never went to the cross, and he's getting some news play now, because the Syrian Bible never. Well, I got it wrong. It wasn't the Syrian Bible. It was the Gospel of Barnabas or something like that. And there are a lot of things that by people coming out and saying, they know, oh, I've researched this extensively. I'm one of the world's leading experts on ancient manuscripts and texts. And, someone goes, oh, okay. And if it appeals to your bias, if you're already, there's so much anti-Christian content out there and seeds of doubt that the enemy is constantly trying to place in people's minds, that it resonates. And people go, oh, well, this expert, so it's got to be true because he's an expert, said that the Bible was changed. Well, here's the thing. We found the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. We have a large part of the Old Testament. And it's basically, there's some punctuation, you can translate a word often, warm, welcoming, inviting. Which word are you going to use? There's a Hebrew word. It could mean warm, inviting, or welcoming. Pick your word. But basically, it's exactly what we have in the Old Testament. We have in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have Nag Hammadi. We have discoveries of papyri and the Gospels that predate Nicaea, and they're exactly what we have in our Bible today, minus punctuation and how a word is translated, but it's the same. So Nicaea did not change the Bible. I would disagree with you on that. Now, with that being said, there are ways that, the words you choose in translating, whether you call a room warm, the room was very warm, or the room was very inviting, both can mean the same thing. The way you choose can steer things. It's not to say it's wrong, and you see that in the Geneva Bible and the King James Bible. The Geneva Bible used very pejorative, heavy-handed language when it came to rulers and kings and dictators, and used very pejorative, negative language around them. And the King James Version, authorized by King James, cleaned up a lot of that pejorative language, softened it. Understandably so, is being authorized by a sitting monarch, whereas the Geneva Bible was translated by theologians. But King James, the authorized King James version, it was being bought and paid. He was paying for the translation, and did a wonderful job in terms of the poetry and the flow and the linguistics of trying to, because the Psalms, for example, are songs. These are songs to be sung. And, you want to have a rhythmic, poetic flow to them, and to render, taking Hebrew and rendering it into English and trying to maintain that feeling of a song, a psalm, can be difficult. Man, I'm going all over. That is what I'm going to do for my next video for fun. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Gospel of Mark. Where does the Gospel of Mark end? I quoted a passage yesterday that is disputed by some as being a later addition. I'll talk about that. And I'll talk about this idea. Can you trust the Bible? I maintain two professions, if anyone cares. One is that the Bible is authoritative. It is an authoritative books, collection, a library of books. It's authoritative, and it is sufficient. It is enough to guide your life on, to use it as your compass. Look at the Bible. If you're facing any moral question, look to the Bible. And it is both authoritative and more than sufficient. I fall short of saying perfection. Some, though, think that God's hand, the book that I'm holding right now, as translated right now, that it is perfect, inerrant. And I don't quite go that far, although I'm pretty close to that. Anyway, I don't like bringing up points of disagreement, because Christians, we fight too much. We fight too much over doctrine. So, Amonarchy's writing. Yeah, that'll be tomorrow. I will go into that as much as I can. As I say, I did, I did some biblical studies at university. That doesn't make me anything special. I was taking humanities, and this is, for much of literature, this is the foundational book. Chaucer, Spencer, Shakespeare, they all knew the Bible. If you want to understand modern literature, this is the foundation. This is the cornerstone, the foundational stone of literature in the English-speaking world. It's right here. And so everything, Christian references are everywhere. Watch Shawshank Redemption. That's Stephen King book. Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It's a Christian allegory. But no, yeah, it's a Christian allegory. The empty tomb, the empty cell, the sinless man bringing hope to the prisoners. I've come, and what did Jesus say when he started his public ministry, as reported as written in Luke? I've come to set the captives free, proclaim the year of Jubilee. That's why Jesus came. He came for you. He came for me. He came for sinners. And we're all sinners. He came for you. But admit, you've got to recognize who you are. You have to be self-aware. You have to be, the world will tell you that's not a sin. You have an excuse. You can live consequence-free. You can do whatever you want. You can sate your every desire. There's no reckoning. There's no consequence. There's a song by Great Big Sea. I want to live consequence-free. I want to live like nothing really matters. Is that the way you want to live? You want to live like life doesn't matter? Or do you want to live a life that matters? If you want to live a life that matters, you're going to get in a relationship with Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Man, oh man. And if this world falling apart doesn't, I think the people watching my channel recognize the world has fallen apart. We don't know a boy from a girl. We've got the state coming in, and people are protesting in Ottawa because they don't want to be forced to take a medical intervention that was rushed through development, and they protest it peacefully, and the government seizes their bank accounts. The same government that tells you we don't know the difference between a man and a woman. Same government that, is seizing weapons from Canadians, seizing firearms. Are they seizing them to keep Canadians safe, or are they seizing the weapons to keep themselves safe from people who might decide the government's gone too far? Which is the reason the founding fathers introduced the Second Amendment to the Bill of Rights. If the government turns tyrannical, the right of the citizenry to bear arms shall not be infringed, so that they can form militias and go up against a government if it turns tyrannical. This world is going crazy. And it's gone crazy before. This isn't the first time that we've lived in times of tribulation. We're not the first society to go through this. I'm reading a biography on Joseph Stalin right now. The Russians went through it. They went through their Bolshevik revolution, and then okay, we won. Now our problems are solved. No, now you got the gulags, and and then you've got the Soviet godless Politburo and the KGB. And you think that kind of stuff can't happen here? We're in the early stages. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. If you're wondering what my mug said, it said current mood. Nope. Christmas present. God bless. And as I like to end my videos, receive these words. They're not from me. They're from Scripture. I'm just passing them along. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord God, the creator of heaven and earth, may he make his face to shine upon you. And may he, the one who created all things, the one who created you, may he grant you peace. And he will, absolutely, he will. He has the capacity. There's nothing he cannot do. Even in the most crazy times, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons and their wives, they found peace in a world gone crazy, with a flood ravaging the planet. They were at rest. They were at peace. So stay strong, and we'll talk to you tomorrow about that topic, about why we can trust the Bible. I do trust it, and I will explain to you why I trust the Bible and try and confront some of these questions that are out there persistently. The enemy trying to plant seeds of doubt to get people to reject or completely reject the Christian faith. So, and Christ. We'll talk to you soon. God bless.